Serious. What is something scary that has happened to you that you cannot explain rationally? I used to work doing maintenance at historic properties. There was a historic house museum I worked at when it wasn't open to the public. It was part of a whole landmark site. There was a visitors center with offices, and then the house was about half a mile up a dirt road in a wooded area. Sometimes I worked with a crew, but there were a lot of times I was there alone. One winter day, when it was really cloudy and dark, I was working alone to get ready to replace some electric work on the exterior of the house. I went inside and turned off the circuit to the whole property, and I tested it. It was off. I locked the doors and went outside to work. After about an hour, I got down from my ladder and started walking around the house, and then one of the lights inside the house turned on. I started to freak out, but thought that maybe someone was playing a joke on me. I called the visitors center on my walkie-talkie and confirmed that the only other person who was working that day was still there and hadn't left, and that all the keys to the house were present and accounted for. That's when I freaked out and ran the half mile up to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to check out what was going on, but when we got to the house, the light was off again, but the bulb was still warm. All the doors were still locked and the circuit was still off. Still gives me shivers to this day. Stationed in Erlangen, Germany between 1990 to 1993, but lived off-post in Nuremberg. Lived in a condominium on Düsseldorfer Strasse with my then wife and 2 daughters. My oldest daughter, 3 years old at the time, would often come running into our bedroom crying and complaining of a monkey in her room. She didn't have any toys of monkeys or apes, so it was kind of baffling to understand her or her fear. Their bedroom and ours were across from each other between the hallway, and we could see directly into their bedroom from ours. One late night, sitting up in bed reading, I caught movement out of my right side. Thinking one of my kids may be up, I walked to their room, but they were both asleep. I go back to my bed and book, and again, I noticed movement, so I glanced over to their room from my bed, and that's when I saw what appeared to be the outline of a child as it walked in the bedroom where my daughters were sleeping. I launched out my bed and covered the distance between my room and theirs in maybe 4 leaps, nothing. My daughters were both sleeping. This was mid-tour for me, so for the remaining year and a half, we all slept in our room. My mother's house has a back door that goes directly from the back porch into the kitchen. The door has a large glass window in it that is uncovered. One day I was going over to her house, and when I pulled up in the back, I very clearly saw a white-haired elderly lady standing in the window of that door, smiling. I assumed she was someone visiting my mother. I looked down to grab my purse and keys, and when I looked back up, she was gone, but I didn't think anything of it. Got out of the car and walked to the back door, looking in the front driveway as I went to see if there was an unfamiliar car there, but it was empty. When I walked inside, my mother came from the front of the house back to the kitchen, and I asked her who was visiting. She looked at me like I was crazy and said no one was there. I know what I saw. I even remember the color of her blouse. So a few years back, probably 6 to 7 years, my family was living in our previous home. This was our second house and we had in Ohio. The first house was about 2 streets over from our second house. Well, one night my mom woke me up and was acting really panicked. She grabbed my brother, who was probably 5 at the time, and told me to go outside. It was about 4 in the morning, and once we all got outside, my dad tried to calm my mom down. He asked her what was wrong, and she had explained that she had a dream that we were all gonna die from carbon monoxide poisoning if we stayed in the house. Then my dad told her that all the detectors were working perfectly fine, and we decided to go back inside. We didn't smell anything, nor did the detectors go off, so we went to bed. The next day, my mom was watching the morning news before we went to school. The first story for the day was that a local family was rushed out of their home because of a carbon monoxide leak in their home. Which could have been just coincidence, but then the news station showed the house. It was our old house that we just moved out of. A week ago tomorrow, October 20th, I came home from class at around 11:30 and no one else was home. I hung out at home for a bit and at 2:30 I was overcome with sleepiness. Being the bum that I am, I laid down in my bed and set a timer on my phone for a 20-minute nap. I fell asleep quickly and after around 5 minutes, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening and had a split second of panic before my dog jumping up onto my bed and laying down next to me. I fell back asleep. After another 5 minutes of sleep, I instantly jolted awake because I was certain there was someone standing next to my bed, behind me. I assumed it was my mother, who would likely be pissed that I was sleeping in the middle of the day. I woke and turned around in one movement and there was no one there. Weird. I checked my phone and had another 8 minutes of sleep left. I went back to sleep only to be woken by my phone ringing. It was my mother. She said that my great aunt, who had been in the hospital after a stroke-like event for a week, had died around 1 o'clock. My mom then said she knew my aunt was going to die today because she had seen a wraith, a sort of ghost, usually warning of someone dying, that morning. My mom is Scottish and very superstitious, but I don't believe in any of that. She said that when she woke up that morning to take my brother to school, she went in my room to see if I was still asleep. She saw a wraith standing next to my bed. My brain soiled itself. My wife and I were asleep one night, and I woke up suddenly and felt like someone was at the foot of our bed. I opened my eyes and saw a woman standing there who looked just like this at the foot of my bed. She slowly turned towards me and just stared. Not being fully awake yet, my brain couldn't get fully afraid, but was instead curious and confused as to why there was another person in the room. I sat up and reached toward the woman, trying to figure out if she was real or not. When my hand reached her face, she disappeared. My wife woke up at this point and asked me what I was doing. All I could say was that I thought I saw something. We both laid back down facing each other and closed our eyes. Not a minute later, we both heard this guttural roar growl that sounded like a mix between a bear, lion, and howler monkey emanating from behind our headboard. There's nothing behind that wall since it's an outside second-story wall. She immediately began screaming and I searched the house from top to bottom. We never found out what made that noise. Took us a while to sleep in our bedroom again. My ex-wife and I bought an older house, 1930s. We were renovating and had put some baseboards into the basement, painted them and left them to dry overnight. We looked at them the next morning, and it looked like someone had taken a sharp knife and dug it in down the entire length of 2 of the baseboards, almost 8 feet each. The blade had gouged through the new paint, old paint, primer and right down to the wood. It was just the 2 of us in the house. In 2002, I lived in the East SF Bay Area with my husband and 2 toddlers. I was grieving over the sudden death of my mother a month before. She'd had a major heart attack and died at 52 years of age. On an average day, I left my babies at home with my husband to run a quick errand by myself. I drove a block over through downtown Hayward to hit up the grocery store. I was on my way home and stopped at a red light waiting to make a left turn. The intersection had all blind corners, so it was difficult to see oncoming cars. My light turned green. I glanced both ways, waited the appropriate second and stepped on the gas pedal. It would not move. I tried again, nothing. The car behind me honked. I looked down under my pedals quickly to see if something had possibly rolled under the pedal and found nothing. I looked up and suddenly a huge work truck loaded down with equipment ran his red light at what must have been 50 miles per hour. I was stunned. I gasped, quickly pulled myself together, stepped on the gas pedal, and it worked with no hesitation. Suddenly I smelled my mother's favorite perfume. Really amazing experience. I was home alone for a weekend a few years ago while I was still in high school. After school one day, I was driving home, and when I passed in front of my house, I thought I saw some old lady in white clothes in my sister's room looking through the window. I thought it was stupid, so I went in the room to check out what it actually was, but I couldn't find anything. I pretty much forgot about it until later that night. I got a call from a very panicked and scared neighbor saying there was some old lady pacing back and forth in my sister's room. I still have no idea what it was, and I've never seen anything like it since. There was a small door that led to the attic space in my bedroom, 11 years old to 13, and it became a habit that I would shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a couple times a week. I didn't think anything of it, just assumed my mom didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while, I made the mistake of joking with her when she made a comment about me not picking up after myself. I said something like, "Every night I have to close the attic door behind you, how about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hasn't been in the attic in months. Asked my brother. Nope. Asked my father. Nope. So then I started to pay really close attention to it. Making sure it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, checking after dinner. Then head up to bed and open. After a couple months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happens if I just don't shut it. Opened the door before school and checked it after school, still open. Checked it after dinner, still open. Before bed, still open. Now I'm laying in bed, mind going crazy with the open door across the room. Decide to check it out, so I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic. To see a face staring back at me. Bolt downstairs, wake parents, get ridiculed by brother, switch bedrooms with brother, move into new house about 6 months later, due to expanding household. New physics teacher and his wife bought our house. I could have forgotten all about that event and chalked it up to me having an overactive mind. But then my senior year, I discovered how awesome our physics teacher was. Became my favorite class and by far, my favorite teacher. End of senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around town, doing mostly silly things, but then took it to my old house to see what they've done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about all the projects my dad did that were still part of the house. Then the wife leads us upstairs to show us the sewing room. I ask jokingly, "Notice anything strange in this room?" And her face goes blank. On camera, she asks what I mean, and I try to shrug it off, but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, the attic door is open. She then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, German Shepherd, had gone into the room but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, and then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and then running off. The dog did not come back until the next day and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs since. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided to just let it be.